Hey everybody, welcome to Cinema Trip Reviews. Today on the show, we're going to be talking about The Warriors. Everybody, welcome back to Cinema Trip Reviews. Before we get into the show, make sure to like, share, and subscribe. Most important thing on the Cinema Trip Reviews channel here and Waves 5 Media. Alex, you are the guest this week, coming back after a couple weeks here. We're going to be talking about actually a favorite movie of mine. I'm glad you were down to do this review here. Because I actually just watched this a couple weeks ago, and it was, I had no problem going back and rewatching it last night. But we're going to be talking about 1979's The Warriors. Now, what's your history with this movie, man? Like, when's the first time you saw it?
Young. But before we get into it, I gotta ask you one question, Wyatt.
Yeah.
Can you dig it, man?
Can you dig it?
Can you dig it? No, I was young. I don't know if I would imagine my mom showed it to me. I think it was just on late night cable or something one time. I remember when I watched it the first time, very edited, very like TV edited, and then rewatching it years later when I didn't see it, I was like, oh, there's a whole bunch more to this movie.
Yeah.
So
I believe the first time I saw it was around 2005, because that's whenever they released like the director's cut that came out, and that's when the Rockstar game came out, the Warriors video game came out, and I remember playing the game before I ever saw the movie. So playing the games, I really wanted to go and check out what the movie was, because the game was kind of a prequel slash like a retelling of the actual movie itself. So it was kind of interesting going from the game to the movie, because now it's quickly grown into a favorite of mine. I really enjoy this movie. It has some rough parts in there. We'll talk about some of the dialogue coming up. It's a little,
hasn't aged well.
It has not aged well for the times that we are in. Before we get into the movie itself, on the show, we like to kind of go over a couple of like little factoids about the movie. Apparently this movie is based off of a book and comic book. Apparently it's not super faithful to the comic, though. They kind of wanted to go in their own direction, but they bought the rights to use the name and some of the characters, I guess. But it's originally based off of a Greek epic called Anabasis, apparently. And it's about the journey of 10,000 Greek mercenaries stranded in Persian territory. And I don't know which version you watched, but the one that's on the Blu-ray is just the director's cut, where it's kind of an extra beginning. There's like an alternate opening to it when you start it.
Yeah, that wasn't the one I watched.
It wasn't the one you watched?
Mm-mm.
And it's pretty much just saying the same exact thing. It's kind of a very comic booky, kind of cartoonish opening, and it's just telling about like all the 10,000 soldiers getting trapped behind enemy lines, and then it kind of just goes directly into the movie, and it says like in the distant future or whatever it says.
Yeah,
and then
that's the one. All the transitions are like a comic book, right?
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say. That's one of the other things that was included that apparently the director wanted to do in the original version, but in 1979 it was hard for them to do. They didn't have the budget to do that sort of thing. So in 2005, when they did the director's cut, they were able to add all the comic booky transitions from going into a scene and out of a scene, certain points throughout the movie, where some points it looks better than others. Some it's like, all right, we probably didn't need that. It looks kind of weird because it looks like you just laid animation over top of the live action, like the actual movie itself. Yeah, so it looks weird, but yeah, that is the big difference. It has been a long time since I've actually seen the actual theatrical cut of it. I've been just watching the director's cut, so I'm just kind of used to
vice
that.
versa. I have seen the director's cut because I remember all those, but it's been a while since I've seen the director's cut because I've seen the theatrical version more now.
Apparently, the guy that wrote The Warriors, specifically wrote it to counteract the romanticized portrayal of street gangs in West Side Story and other movies like that. And I mean, it fits. I kind of totally understand why he did it there. And another little factoid about the movie, Deborah Van Valkenburgh, who played Mercy in the movie, apparently she had 2 major injuries during the movie itself. Michael Beck accidentally hit Deborah in the face with a baseball bat during the filming of it, and apparently she had to get immediate stitches. And then during one of the subway evasion scenes, she was accidentally dropped on the floor by a stuntman and broke her wrist. Oof. That's why at one point in the movie, she has a jacket on through the rest of the movie, and it's to cover up like the cast on her wrist and everything.
I have one fact before we move on, though.
Okay.
When I was looking it up, I found it interesting. I read that they hired a gang called the Mongrels to actually protect them, like the
Yeah.
film crew. And I was like, "Oh, that's interesting." I heard they had a lot of like gang like related problems filming
Yeah.
this.
Well, the other note I had here is apparently they brought in a bunch of different gang members, not just for protection, but just to use in the movie itself.
Yeah,
And apparently they actually cast a dude as Cyrus, who was going to be, one of the main characters in it, and he was an actual gang member, but apparently he vanished the night before filming, and they never heard from him again. But apparently because they had so many gang members that were involved with the protection and also the making of the movie, they had like undercover cops dressed up as like extras throughout the actual movie itself, just for some extra protection in there as well.
wild.
Yeah, I don't know what it is about this movie, man. I just love the grittiness of it and how it's, even though you could tell it's very 70s, it also kind of has like a futuristic kind of tone to it in a way, like with the music and just the way like New York is kind of set up, where it just seems like it's run by all these like 100 different gangs just controlling each part of the city and everything. It's directed by Walter Hill. He didn't really direct a lot of big things after this.
Produced.
He did produce.
What he produced? He produced Aliens, one of my faves.
Aliens. But as of directing, he only did like 48 Hours, with Nick Nolte and Eddie Murphy. He directed both of those. He
Never seen
directed
it.
Brewster's Millions with
Love that.
Richard Pryor in it, and Red Heat, which is like an Arnold Schwarzenegger movie. I've never saw that one.
Mm-mm.
The movie itself, you got Michael Beck in here as Swan, James Remar as Ajax. He's probably the most notable cast member other than David Patrick Kelly, who plays Luther, one of the bad guys in it. David Patrick Kelly's in Twin Peaks. He was also one of the bad guys in The Crow as well. And James Remar, he's been in a bunch of stuff as well. He was Raiden in like Mortal Kombat Annihilation. He's Dexter's foster dad in the show Dexter. He's in a bunch of other stuff. He's like a bad guy in The Phantom, which we got to cover eventually because I love The Phantom. Billy Zane.
I haven't seen that movie since
I haven't
was like
either,
10,
man.
probably.
I haven't either, man, but that's a movie we should cover sometime. Going right into the movie, I talked about the alternate opening, kind of explaining the Greek soldiers that were trapped behind Persian lines. It goes into like a very comic booky opening, but then it transitions into the famous like Wonder Wheel shot there right at the beginning of the movie. And I love the setup and the intro to this because you have that awesome like 70s like synth music, kind of like reminds you of like Carpenter a little bit. But interlaid throughout, it's just cutting between like the subway and subway maps, and then like it's kind of setting up the story for you before you even get into it.
We ain't even been to the Bronx before. No sweat. This conclave is going to be a real big item. Every gang in the city's going to be there.
They're talking about, they got a huge meeting going down. All the gangs are going to be there. It's like 100 gangs, 9 men from each gang or something like that. No weapons. And then they're just figuring out how they're going to get there because they're from Coney Island, and I think they're traveling all the way up to like the Bronx or something. They said.
Yeah, I don't remember where they go, but they go far away from Coney Island.
Yeah, pretty much the other end of New York there, and that's pretty much, it's a simple plot. They go there, something happens, and then they just got to find a way to get back. It's kind of like a video game in a way because it transitions well to a video game back when they made it, because as you're watching it, you go from like, all right, here's a little setup, fight scene. You get in a little setup, fight scene. Like you go from one like boss to the next boss, like by these different gangs kind of.
It's actually on one of my cons. You're exactly right. It feels exactly like the next level. Like I've never played the Rockstar game. I've always been curious about it. Never got around to playing the Rockstar game, but I'm like, this would translate so well.
Oh yeah,
because it's a very loose thread, just keeping it to the next level, to the next level, to the next level.
I love the opening here, just with the music and the transitions, and just like kind of like how the camera's going down the subway. You see like the title cards kind of coming at you and stuff as it's cutting throughout like the different gang members talking. Kind of get a feel for their personalities a little bit before you get into it. James Remar is Ajax. He's kind of like the tough guy of the gang. He's kind of the hothead also. He has a tendency to use some very troubling homophobic language that we're not going to say, but he has a tendency to say it throughout the course of this movie. It's not just one time. He says it a couple different times throughout the whole movie. But you get to meet like they don't really even call him, like, I think they only mention he's the leader one time, but Cleon is the leader of the Warriors, the dude with like kind of like the leopard print, like bandana on his head. And then Swan's kind of like the backup, the number 2 dude who eventually becomes the leader of the Warriors through the rest of the movie. But yeah, they're pretty much just going to this huge meeting up at the other side of New York. All the gangs are going to be there. It's called by Cyrus, who is like the leader of the Riffs. I think they're called the Grand Mercy Riffs, which is the biggest gang in New York apparently at this point. And the reason of the meeting is because they're trying to all come together, join one big gang. That way they can take over the whole city. And then that way they can get money flow and they can tax people for certain stuff. They can just pretty much take control of the whole city. That's their whole plan at this point. They want to have like a peace treaty. You actually get one of the most famous scenes of the movie itself with Cyrus, who is such a kind of a cool character, but you barely get to see him.
Barely see him. But the most famous, probably the most famous, second most famous line of this movie, you know.
Can you dig it? Can you dig it? Can you dig it?
Yeah,
spouts it.
Can you dig it?
It's so famous. I think I knew that line long before I've seen this movie.
I feel like he says turf like 20 times in the matter of a couple minutes too. He's like, "This is our turf. We're gonna protect our turf, and no one's gonna take our turf." Turf.
Our turf. Piece of turf. The turf. Our turf. It's all our turf.
Just so we're not confused, we're talking about turf here, people. But yeah, and it's kind of really cool to see just this huge park just packed with all these different gang members. And there's just nine people from each gang, and they're just all just jam-packed here, taking up the whole park. And then, of course, towards the end of his speech, you get to see that gun getting passed through, even though no one's supposed to bring any weapons or anything. I don't know how nobody saw this gun getting passed through, or how they didn't see Luther, played by David Patrick Kelly, who does a great job in this movie. He's so evil. Like, he's such a evil presence in it.
This is and I might have to disappoint you, but this is where some of my contentions start to go with him.
Oh, really?
He's not well written. He's very well acted and he's very well done.
He does what
but
he can.
He has no motivation. Like, I'm like, what is this guy's motivation behind this? He's just like an asshole. Like,
they
that's
just needed like a big bad, I guess, if you want to call him that. My real problem with the movie probably comes at the very end, but we'll get to that.
We'll get to it.
But yeah, the gun gets passed down through the actual ranks here. I don't know why Fox all of a sudden, like from the Warriors, the dude with the afro, it's just the dude that plays Windows in the Thing. He splits from the Warriors and kind of walks up through the crowd to get to the front to see a better view, which is like, I don't know, everyone's kind of sticking in their own gangs. I don't know why you would have did that, but I guess it's just so they can blame the Warriors, I guess.
Yeah, somebody.
But yeah, the gun gets passed through to Luther. He ends up taking the shot. He kills Cyrus, which pretty much immediately breaks the pact, the peace treaty immediately. And everybody scatters. The police
Cops
show up. And then, unfortunately, you get to see the inevitable demise of Cleon, who I mentioned. Cleon. Yeah, Luther. I know. I was going to say Cletus as well. But Luther, he pretty much just blames the Warriors for it because they were right there in front of him. He's like,
"There he is! That's him! That's the Warrior! He shot Cyrus!"
You made you crazy. I didn't do nothing.
And Cleon's like, "No, I didn't, motherfucker. Like, you saw me standing here." And then he's just roundhouse kicks some of these dudes. He's fighting them off, and then just immediately everybody jumps him. And like, it seems like he's on the ground, but it's so funny because it's kind of like a sky view, and you just see like the people around him just like elbowing down, but there's nobody there. Where you don't see him the rest of the movie, but apparently like the writers and the director did confirm that he died there. Like they straight up killed him there. And at that point, everybody breaks up, but they all meet back up at an abandoned cemetery there, just right outside of the park. They kind of regroup. Swan pretty much just takes over leadership. Like, I'm going to be the leader of the gang. Ajax has a problem with that. He challenges him. The rest of everybody's like, all right, now's not the time for this. We'll figure this out at another time. But just let Swan do it.
Back on Coney. Yeah, back on Coney. Let's keep moving.
Yeah, and that's another thing. Like, through the movie, it seems like a couple of the guys in the gang, they get sidetracked where the whole focus should be, you guys need to get home. Like, you guys got home. Yeah. But everyone's like, well, we should do this, man. Or like, oh, let's let's find some chicks, man, while we're here or whatever. Like, everyone's trying to kill you.
That's what I'm saying. I mean, they don't quite know that now at this point in the movie, but when they do figure it out, my big thing, and maybe I've never been in a gang, so I don't have that kind of pride, like, just take the fucking coat off and walk home.
Nah,
like,
you
if you would just take the thing that says the Warriors off your back,
they can't
you could
do
just
it.
probably walk home. You could just fold it around your arm probably and be fine.
Nah, man, they don't take off their colors, man. They talk about that here. We'll get to that.
This movie also makes it feel just how it's shot and stuff that there's nobody else in the city. I don't think you meet one other civilian. There's not any. What are they controlling?
Other than cops and then that one lady out on the park bench, which we'll get to later.
Who's a cop?
Yeah, who pretty much is a cop. But yeah.
Sorry.
But yeah, you don't really see any like civilians out on the top. Maybe they heard that there's a huge gang meeting that's going to be in the park, so everybody just kind of just locked themselves in their house. But yeah, New York's pretty much practically empty other than the gangs in the city. So like,
it is empty.
What are they fighting to take control? Like, because it seems like the city's already the gangs. So why would they already come together? Why would they all form one gang at that point if they all own their own piece of turf?
Yeah.
But yeah, they regroup at the cemetery. Ajax challenges Swan for war chief. They decide to move on from that. And this was hilarious to me. They get Rembrandt. They're like, Rembrandt, make sure to tag the tombstone, or like make sure to tag the place. Let everybody know the Warriors was here. Because at the beginning of the movie, they're like, bring your spray paint. We're gonna tag everything you see. Make sure everybody knows the Warriors were in town. And this is pretty much the only time you see them tag anything in this movie. And all it is, and this dude is supposed to be the the like tagger of the group, the artist of the group. That's why they named him Rembrandt. And the tag for the Warriors, all it is just a W. And he takes his time doing it like it's some kind of artsy thing. Nope, it's just a straight W. Like, you could have come up with something a little better than that, man.
Yeah, you're the Coney Island Warriors. You could do like a symbol or something.
Yeah, they have like the whatever, like the bird, like the eagle or something on their jacket.
The Ferris wheel.
Yeah, do something cool like that. I know it probably takes some time, but do something than just a regular W. Like,
I feel like you could do a circle and then the W in it, and it could be it could look like a Ferris wheel.
See, that would have been cool. They should have did that.
Fine.
Or else it could have been just me walking around spray painting my first initial on stuff. Like, it could have been Wyatt just walking around. Like, oh, Wyatt was here.
You get in trouble with other gangs. You part of the Warriors? No, man. I was just gonna put my name on this.
Yeah, I usually write my name on stuff.
Yeah.
But at this point, the Gramercy Riffs, they put a hit out on the Warriors. They said that they want them dead or alive, but preferably alive. They want to, they want them in their control. And then that's when you kind of get the radio announcer you see kind of sporadically throughout the movie here. And from what I saw, just kind of reading up, this is the radio station all the gangs listen to for news, I guess.
I've been asked to relay a request from the Gramercy Riffs. It's a special for the Warriors. That's that real live bunch from Coney. And I do mean the Warriors.
And she's
the one radio station.
The one radio station in the city full of no people other than gangs. Yeah. And she's the one that pretty much lets everybody know, like, the Warriors are out there. They're trying to get home. Everybody's looking for them. And the songs that they play has something to do with, their situation. And the song they play at that point is like, what is it? Like, Run, You Can't Hide or something like that.
Yeah.
Nowhere to run, nowhere to hide. That's what it is.
Lots of 70s music in this, and that's
some
not
music
a down.
That doesn't even fit too. Like,
no,
yeah.
So, but I think the soundtrack's actually one of the best parts of this film.
Oh, it's a great soundtrack, but there are certain points in it where it's like, oh, that song just kind of doesn't fit for the style. I feel of the movie
because it looks grittier than the soundtrack lets on sometimes.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Whereas if you probably would have stuck with like kind of the synthy guitar stuff that you had at the opening throughout the whole movie, it would have worked a lot better. Kind of like an Escape from New York kind of vibe a little bit. But as they're playing the song, you get a montage of all these different gangs, going out looking for them. You got like the skinheads on the bus driving around, the Baseball Furies, who are one of the most popular ones that you see in like a lot of the marketing and even in the game and stuff. They got their face painted like Kiss and stuff, and they have like Yankees uniforms on. But yeah, you get just a montage of all these different gangs going out and looking for the Warriors, and the Warriors are trying to get home at this point. And then the Warriors are waiting for the train. They're Ajax kind of wondering, like, what the hell are we doing here? Like, we need to just book it. And pretty much the reasoning was, we're sitting here because if we go up there, we're stuck waiting for this train. Like, we're stuck on a platform. We can get jumped all of a sudden. So they wait for the train to roll by, and just as that train's coming through, the bus full of skinheads comes, and so they book it, they make a run for it. Nothing really too exciting because the dudes don't even really get off the bus. Like, they drive past them as they're going up and jump on the train and get away. But even as when they're going from like one point to the next from these different gangs, or if they're getting on a train, you kind of get that radio update like, oh, they're on the train here. This gang saw them, or they got past them. And then they ended up stopping them. They set fire to like a building that spread onto the tracks. So they had to stop the train. So they had to get off a little early. And their plan is, if they get separated, they got to meet up at, I think it was like Union Square. And that's what they keep mentioning throughout most of the movie. It's like, we got to get back to Union Square, meet up at Union Square. But as they're getting off the train, you cut to, you only get like 2 small scenes with the Rogues, with like David Patrick Kelly. And like you're saying, they don't really have much of a motivation other than just being dickheads and trying to blame the Warriors. Even if they would have had some backstory, maybe if they would have fit it in where like maybe the Rogues had like a previous history with the Warriors or something, with the reason that they did this. Whereas
I just want to know why they shot Cyrus, period. Like,
well, well, you figure that out at the end, man. I mean, he says that he asked, I just like doing that kind of stuff,
I guess.
Man.
We'll call that a motive.
But they're just like they're harassing this girl. Like, this is actually another person, a civilian, just this girl that works at this little newsstand.
Might be the only civilian. I feel so bad for her because he's just stealing shit from her and yelling at her. And he's like on the phone with like the boss, I guess. I don't know who he's talking to. I'm guessing he's like the leader of the Riffs, my guess is. The dude that kind of, you assume, took over for Cyrus after he got killed. Yeah.
Cut back to the Warriors. They run into the orphans who weren't even invited to the meeting. They didn't even know about a meeting. Like, what do you mean there was a meeting? There's no meeting if the orphans aren't there.
How could this be a big meeting if the orphans wasn't there?
Listen, you didn't miss anything. There was a lot of hassle, a lot of heads got busted.
Yeah, you think the orphans ain't with it?
And Swan's even like, all right, I'm going to go talk to him. Don't try to start any shit. We're just going to try to get through here. No problem.
So cheer up, bud.
Yeah, and they're just trying to get on his good side. Like, oh, and they even shows him like a clipping of a paper. Like, that was us. They write about the shit that we do, man. And they're like, oh, yeah, I heard about that. Like, yeah, that was you guys? Oh, okay. And then the dude's like, all right, you guys can pass. And then Mercy comes out and wrecks everything.
Bitch.
Just wrecks it all. Pretty much just calling him a pussy, pretty much. Just you just letting other gangs just run through your own turf, and then eventually they're going to take over your turf. And then he's just like, all right, well, if you going to come through our turf, you got to take off your colors, man. No wearing your shit around here. And this is like what you were saying. They were like,
we don't do that.
It's just our mark. It don't mean we're at war.
You go as civilians, okay? You go as soldiers, I got to come down on you. Now take off your colors.
Fuck you.
It was like, I mean, yeah, that's probably would have been the best way to get around. Like, you could have just took off your colors and just went home. Probably could.
Yeah.
I mean, there's no
not gonna help
taxis
anybody dead
for some reason, but you probably could have took a taxi or something back to Coney Island.
No, it's far in the future or past taxis.
Yeah, this is like post-apocalyptic New York or something. There's no people. It's just gangs. It's like Mad Max out here in New York. Which
this is when they're seeing the orphans. There's like cars on fire and shit on the street, right?
Yeah, there's like shells of cars, like buildings are all beat up and shit.
Yeah, the orphans are not in a good like part of town. I mean, if any of it's a good part of town.
Yeah, and they're pretty much just a joke. Like they're not even on anybody's radar. And whenever it cuts back to like the Riffs, they were talking about like they ran in the orphans and they're like just some low level gang, whatever, that's not even on our radar. And like they know who they are, but just like like, they're nobody serious. They decide to take off because the orphans are going to go get reinforcements. Mercy ends up following them, and they end up just catching her. And Ajax, you already know he's the asshole of the group. And you're like, oh, Swan is kind of he's the leader now. He's kind of the good guy or whatever. And then he's like, he turns into an asshole. And he's like, well, maybe we ought to run a train on you. I think you'd like it.
You gonna jump me?
Maybe we ought to pull a train on you. You look like you might even like it.
And you're like, damn, what the? Like,
Yeah,
you guys
man,
gotta get
chill.
home. What are you worried? Like, just go. What are you
They
worried
worry
about this chick
about way too
following you
much.
for?
Yeah, way too much little shit.
Yeah.
Just move on.
And as they're worrying with her, the orphans catch up to them, and they just stand there and watch them make a Molotov cocktail right in front of them, light it, and throw it at them. And they could have been like attacking them while they were doing that. They get away again. They get to another train to make it to Union Square. The Rogues, apparently, they hear on the radio about him. They know exactly where to cut him off. And this is one of his other, like, it's not a famous quote, but one of my favorite quotes of his, because he's like, well, let's go get him, man. And he's like, man, the place is gonna be crawling with cops and shit. And he's like, I know, but let's just go. And he's like, why are you in such a good mood? He's like,
I'm having a good time.
they're just not about it at this point. And he's like, no, I'm excited. Let's go. Like, Luther's all about it at this point.
Good acting again. Luther is a fun part of the movie.
Oh yeah. Yeah. And I mean, he has one of the most famous lines in the movie, which we'll get to eventually here. A couple of the Warriors were separated because they were just trying to get to the train. Someone got separated. Mercy ended up separating with Fox. A couple of the other guys got separated as well. But the cops are chasing them all over the place. Mercy and Fox go down into like the subway station, and Fox gets in a tussle with one of the cops, and the cops throw him in front of one of the subway trains.
Yeah.
And apparently this wasn't originally supposed to happen. Apparently this dude got fired. And if you watch it closely, because I read about it before I rewatched it, so I took notice of it. It's a whole different guy in this scene. Most of the time when you see this dude, it's from like behind or on the side where you can't really see his face. Apparently he had a falling out with the director and shit. He just kept disappearing from set a lot. He was like showing up drunk, and he was going out and getting high off of the set, and he was just a problem apparently. But apparently he was going to be one of the ones that made it to the end, and he was actually going to be the love interest with Mercy, but then they ended up switching it to Swan eventually.
Because
yeah, but because of everything and the falling out, they ended up firing him. They were like, all right, we got to find a way to kill him off. So they ended up writing the subway train thing in.
now, and maybe I missed it. Why do the cops even give a shit about the Warriors? Like, they're not a gang. Like, why are they specifically after the Warriors?
I was under the impression they were after all the gang members. They were out to get all the gang members out here.
They seem very focused on the Warriors.
Like what I mentioned with like the Rogues, like other than Luther, the other gang members are like, they're like, the cops are looking for everybody. Like, why do you want to go there? And he's like, well, we gotta go get the Warriors and shit. Like, we're hunting them down. But because of the murder and everything, I think the cops are just looking to grab anybody as of right
Just
now.
picking people up off the street.
Yeah, I think the only ones specifically looking for the Warriors are the gangs. I think the cops are looking for anybody they can fucking grab.
All right, maybe I just missed that. All right.
The Warriors get away from the cops. They immediately run into the Baseball Furies, who proceed to go on a foot chase for like 5 minutes throughout the empty city streets and the subway into the park, where you have a confrontation. You have a brawl in the middle of the park where it's just a bunch of bats clanging against each other, where it's like the same move over and over. He's swinging down, and he just keeps blocking them with the bat. They do that like 7 times in a row. And apparently when Ajax, because they're running, and the one dude's like, I can't do it anymore, man. He's like, good, because I've been looking to fight. I've been looking to get into a scrap. And Ajax, apparently, when he takes one of the baseball bats and he like jabs the one dude, apparently he broke the dude's ribs in real life. And apparently James Remar, the dude that plays Ajax, didn't even hear about it until like 30 years later during one of like the panels. He's like, I didn't even know that. Like, I broke the guy's ribs.
My bad.
But yeah, that's kind of I wouldn't say a famous scene, but that's one of the more famous gangs that you see in the movies, Baseball Furies.
Yeah,
the
another
more well-known ones.
Another super famous line comes from that, where he's like, I'm gonna stick that baseball bat up your ass and make you a popsicle or something.
Make you a popsicle.
I'll shove that bat up your ass and turn you into a popsicle.
The fight choreography in the movie isn't great by any means. It could have been a lot better, especially with the weapons, like the baseball bats.
It's a little rough.
It's a little rough. But there's a couple things that are okay about it. I like the fight later that we'll get to better than this one. But they ended up, it seems like everybody they run into, they end up pummeling. They got rid of the baseball furies. They made it through them. And this is at the point where it's pretty much like, all right, you're running into different gangs. All right, where are you at now? Maybe get to a subway, such and such. Oh, you run into another gang.
Next level. Next level.
But 3 of the other warriors that were separated, they ended up running into the Lizzies, another gang just made up completely of women who tricked them into coming back to the pad to pretty much have a huge party. Where at this point, like, I understand, like, you wanna go out and get some tail, but man, everybody's hunting you, or you think you're just trying to get home at this point. Like, come on, man. And you don't go into some strange people's apartment at this point in time. Like, you have to try to meet up.
They're another gang too. They're a gang.
Exactly. And they tell you, like, we're the Lizzies. But if you know that you have a plan to meet up with everybody if you get separated at Union Square, that's should be your priority at this point. And Rembrandt even tells him that. Like, he's the one that's, like, not about it the whole time. He's like, man, we should get up out of here. And the other guy's like, come on, man. We just got here. We'll be all right, man. Don't worry about it. But before we get to the conclusion of that part of the story, you jump back to the demise of Ajax. He just could not help himself. As we alluded to earlier, they're just walking through the park, and there's just this lone woman just sitting on a bench there, and he's just like, hey, man, let's go have some fun or whatever. And the guy's like, come on, man, we just gotta get home, man. Like, come on.
It's been a long night.
And of course, he has to use some troubling language he uses for the last time, because he's like, fuck you guys, I'm gonna stay around. You guys peace out. As they're leaving, they even like, hey, man, we should probably go back and make sure he doesn't do anything stupid. He's like, you guys should have did that way ahead of time. Like, you passed that. He made his bed. Yeah, just lie in it.
Peace.
Yeah.
You grown man.
Yeah. Because Ajax gets pretty handsy, gets pretty rapey with this chick. And she turns out to be a cop and just handcuffs him to that bench. He starts losing his shit. The cops come in. And I love this entrance because they could have just like pulled up and got out of the car. But no, they do this huge like tail slide in and then immediately off, like, it's super dramatic entrance.
They got one,
and then they come in and they just like beat the hell out of him, put him in the cop car and everything. He's like bleeding from the face and shit, and they're just kind of dropping like flies at this point as they're trying to make their way back to Coney Island. Swan runs into Mercy, and they are chased by the cops once again into the subway, and they go into a subway tunnel. And this is, I don't know. I kind of like the scene, but at the same time, it's weird because you actually got to see some backstory with, not backstory, but you got to get to see just kind of some character development with both, more so Mercy than Swan's, because Swan just turns into a complete asshole at this point. Where she's
the only character development you're going to get through this whole film, pretty much.
Yeah. Whereas, like, I feel like Swan, he was supposed to be kind of like the moral compass, like the leader, like he's going to be the one dude you want to follow, and he's just kind of an asshole where he's just like, because she even tells him, like, why are you such an asshole? Like, what's your beef with me? And he's like, I just don't like the way you live. Like, pretty much saying, like, you can have a better life.
Prostitute.
Like, you can have a better life than this, but you don't do anything about it, such and such and whatever. Which, like, he has a point, but he could have, provided his point a little better than what he did,
Like, dude, you're a gang member.
You're a gang member, dude.
Who are you talking to? You think you're a
running
lawyer?
From the cops. You're framed for murder.
Yeah. What are you talking about?
You're not much better, man.
Who are you to judge me?
Yeah, and that's pretty much what she was saying, too. She's starting to think about that through these little lulls in the movie through the rest of it. She kind of has that on the mind, and then that kind of opens up his mind here towards the end as well, because by the end, he's even like, man, I'm thinking about just leaving this shit all behind and just piecing, just going out, just doing my own thing, leaving the gang. And then you cut back to the other dudes. The Lizzies end up locking the door, and I don't know how nobody gets shot in this tiny one-room apartment, because they're busting out knives and they're shooting guns in here at everybody, and nobody gets hit. Rembrandt gets slashed with a knife as they're making their way out. But they just like bust through the fucking door, like they bust the whole door down as they're escaping. But like, I don't know how these dudes just didn't know they were being set up. Like other than Rembrandt's like the one that seems like he's the rookie. He's the one that seems like he just joined the gang. He's the youngest one, and he's the one that's like the voice of reason.
Too good to be true. It's too good to be true.
Yeah, like come on, guys. Like something's up. We gotta go. And even like as a viewer, you don't know. I mean, like the first time you're watching this, you don't really know what's going on, but at the same time, you're like, something's off. Something's going on here. They should probably leave. But yeah, all hell breaks loose in that little like one room apartment, and they like they trick them for a while because it seems like they're at the apartment partying, and for a while they're making out with each other, they're dancing and stuff. Like they get them real comfortable before they turn on them.
Like, you didn't need to go through all that. You could just lock the door.
You could have got them in the apartment and locked the door and then jumped them. But man, they partied with them for a while.
And in this party, is it before or after that? They do tell them they didn't shoot Cyrus, right? Like this is when it comes out that they're like, no, we had nothing to do with this. This is this party, right?
Yeah, because I think
Rembrandt.
Yeah, because the one chick tells them.
You're the famous warriors, the guys that shot Cyrus.
Shit, the chicks are packed!
They end up telling a lot of people later too, but yeah, they're the ones that find out about it, and then that's who they tell. Whenever they all meet up at the Union Square, they say, like, everybody thinks we killed Cyrus. Like, oh, that's why everybody's fucking after us. This is a really cool scene that I like in the movie when they're all meeting up in the at the subway station. And as Swan's walking through, because he ditches Mercy there in the subway tunnel, he could have at least got her back to the platform, but he just leaves her in the tunnel. But he's being just followed by one of the punks, is who they're called, and they're on rollerblades. But it's so silent. Like as he's walking, the dude's just like silently, just like skating behind him, like weaving in and out of the poles and stuff. Is really cool. And I like the scene where like he's just standing there and she comes up to him. She's like, "Hey, I want to let you know something. Like you being followed. This dude, like," he's like, "Yeah, I know. You just blew my cover."
I know they're on my ass. But now they know I know it.
He already had it figured out. Like he knew what was going on. But I just love that little scene where he's just sitting there waiting, and she just completely blows his cover once again. She just fucks it up.
Mercy.
Yeah, and it just works out perfectly because as soon as that happens, he looks up. The other warriors are coming down the stairs, and like I just like the little interaction because he just like you just see his eyes look over, like, all right, look over here. They're over here. They're watching us or whatever. And then he just like moves his head, and they all just gang up. They go into the bathroom. She's like, "I can't go in there. That's the men's room." He's like, "I never fucking stopped you before. Come on." He like pushes her in. And then you get pretty much one of the last brawls in the movie is the huge bathroom brawl, and they're just throwing each other.
This is my favorite one, though.
Oh yeah, it's my favorite one as well. They're just throwing each other through the stalls, and it's just a huge free for all in the bathroom. They're all getting bruised and banged up, and they're bleeding and shit. And these dudes are fighting on roller skates, which would be super hard.
Stomp some feet, man. It hurt.
But yeah, I love the whole setup where it's just kind of there's not really much music playing as like the dudes are just skating around following them, and then they're going and looking in the stalls and stuff. So after they once again take out a whole nother gang, and they're not even a full gang at this point. There is only like 5 of them maybe. They take out a whole nother gang. So they take the train back to Coney Island after this point, after the brawl in the men's room. And this is actually one of my favorite scenes in the movie. I kind of like this one a lot. As they're sitting on the subway, everybody's just fucking just beat up. They got cuts and bruises all over them. Everybody's
very
just
quiet.
I don't know how these dudes made it through this night, because they're constantly running full sprint throughout the whole movie pretty much, and then you're getting in these fights sporadically after you're done sprinting. So like I just don't know how these dudes are doing it. Like you'd be sleeping for 2 days after that night, man. But they're just kind of just relaxing on the subway, and Swan's sitting with Mercy here, and I guess the kind of other civilians, people that came from a prom, I guess. Like
yeah.
The couple that the 2 couples that come in from the prom, they get on the subway, and it's funny because they're sitting there talking, and they're just kind of like they're kind of eyeing them up because they're gang members on the subway, and like Mercy goes to like fix her hair, and like Swan just like puts her hand down, just like, no, don't try to pretty yourself up to like make yourself look good, in front of these people, like be who you are. And he just puts her hand down for her. And as the people are like, they just get off at the next stop, and she drops her corsage or whatever. And as they're getting off the train, he picks it up and gives it to her. And he's like, I just didn't want it to go to waste. Just being the, tough guy, I guess, playing the
This is the one scene that we're supposed to believe that Mercy falls in love with him then.
Yeah. Yeah.
He's a fucking ass to her the whole movie. But this one.
And she pretty much the whole time just wants to fuck. Like, that's what that's what she's saying the whole time. It's like, she wants him to do her in the middle of that subway tunnel. It's just like, really?
No.
Just no. Like, he straight up turns her down too. He's like, no. But yeah, they finally make it back to like Coney Island, but of course the rogues are waiting for him there. They're sitting there under this pier, and the car just rolls up. And this is probably the most famous part of the movie itself. And apparently it was just completely improvised. This wasn't written for the movie. It was just David Patrick Kelly just doing his thing here.
Warriors, come out to play. Warriors, come out to play.
Clinking those bottles, man, and there's just no music playing, and it gives me chills thinking about it because it's such a great scene. It just cuts back and forth from them just staring at him underneath this pier, and he's just clinking just the sound of those bottles. And
It's so
constantly just going up every time he says it.
yeah, higher and higher pitched.
Higher pitched.
I actually, one of my favorite memories about this scene is when I first started dating Marissa, I wanted to watch this movie with her. And I'm telling her about this scene. And like, this scene is super, super famous. I was like, and I show her the video of the Warriors, and Tyler, my son, is sitting there. He's 8 at this point, 9 maybe. And I'm watching this video. He's like, no, I know that. He's like, that's from my TV show. And I was like, what? And he's like, no. And he shows me the show called like Ricky, Dickie, and Dawn or something I've never seen. It's a kid's show. And there's a scene in it where the dad is clinking together these like dice or something. And he's like, whatever their last name is. And he's like, come out and play. And I just thought it was so funny that this movie that came out in the 70s, that Tyler has no idea what it is.
Yeah.
He knows that scene though. Like he knows that cadence, that line. He's like, oh, I know that. And I'm like,
yeah,
what?
I do know that it has been parodied in some form a couple different times.
Mordecai, put your phone away. Mordecai, put your phone away.
Bullies, come out to play.
Oh no, he's got 3 bottles.
It's awesome how they incorporate kind of those little Easter eggs in some of these like children programming for like the parents and adults and stuff.
Yeah. Oh, if I had saw it, I'd been like,
yeah. Oh no. Oh shit.
I know.
Before like that scene, we already mentioned about it, but as they're getting off the train, he gives her the corsage and everything. And that's whenever he talks about like, man, I'm just thinking about just leaving this all. Like, I'm done with this shit. Like, I just want to just leave and just travel. And she's like, I love travel. Like, I would love to leave. Or like, I love travel. He's like, where have you been? You've never been anywhere. And she's like, no, but I think I would love it. I think I would like it.
Been to Coney Island now.
Yeah, I've never been here, and it's just on the other side of New York. But yeah, you get that famous scene with David Patrick Kelly, and they're just like, all right, let's just weapon up a little bit. They're busting pipes out from under this pier. They're busting bottles, just getting all this stuff they can find. And I think about it every time because they're like, oh, he's like, you guys good? And like, yep, we're good. And they're like, are you good, Swan? And he's like, yeah, I'm good. And he like takes out a switchblade and he like turns his back to the rogues and he puts the knife in his back pocket. So he pretty much turns to them to show them that he's putting the knife in. And this comes into play in like 5 minutes. So it's like, he could have just put it in his back pocket, not showing the rogues. But the way they had it filmed, it was like, they would have totally known that they saw him just stick a knife in the back of his pants. But yeah, they weapon up, and the plan is to draw them out to the beach. And they're going to have this big brawl on the beach, and you never get it. You never get it, man. And I was like, I'm disappointed every time because you build Luther and the Rogues up to be this, they're going to be the final boss of the. Yeah, exactly. It ends on a fizzle. Very anticlimactic. But they lure him out to the beach. They kind of have a big standoff here, and he asks him, like, why'd you do it, Luther? And that's when you get, like, the line is, like...
No reason. I just like doing things like that.
I couldn't come up with a reason.
You couldn't come up with a reason? Like, what? All you had to say was just like, yeah, we just didn't want to split into one gang. Like, why would we share the profits with everybody else when we could have did it ourselves?
They could have made it that they were the second most powerful gang in New York, and they were about to be number one. So
we're going to overtake the Riffs or whatever. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I'm not sharing. Like anything. Yeah, I'd have been happy with anything.
Or if they had some previous backstory with the Warriors, they could have brought that into play at one point too, where there's like, we just fucking hate you guys.
Yeah.
But yeah, you think they would have had some sort of like history or something, some beef with Cyrus where they would have went out and killed him for some sort of reason instead of just being a psychopath and just wanting to do it for fun.
Yeah. And by the way, this is gangs, so they're acting like he's the worst of them. I'm like, they're gangs. I'm sure there's 50 million of them that are like that, you know?
Yeah.
Like, they're in gangs.
But everybody else seemed to manage to not bring weapons and be cool with the and
Exactly.
they were able to dig it.
Can you dig it?
Swan's just like, we don't have to settle this as a brawl. Like, me and you, one-on-one, let's do this. And he just takes the bitch way out. He pulls a gun on him. And he's just like, it's such a terrible cut. Like, how they edited it. Where he's just like, as he's shooting, he like pulls the knife out and throws it. And it just jump cuts into his hand.
You're dead.
Swan!
Dude's fucking Deadpool.
Yeah, where it's like after that, maybe like his dudes would then jump the Warriors or whatever. Nope. The Riffs just come in. They're like, all right, we're taking this
done.
party over here.
Yeah.
And you're like, you the Warriors? And they're like, yeah. And you're like, you guys cool. We good. We know it.
Yeah, that other gang shows up. The other.
Yeah, the Riffs.
I'm guessing the Riffs. Yeah.
Yeah. The Riffs show up, and they're the biggest gang in New York. That's why they're trying to convince everybody to come together to take over the city. But yeah, they show up. My guess is they heard his speech saying that he confessed to doing it, and he's like, yeah, we just want him and them. That's all we want. You guys are cool. And then even like compliments him, like, you guys are good. Real good.
You warriors are good. Real good. The best.
I like the way that goes. Like, you could have had the brawl and then finished on that, because I like how that ended. And then it just cuts to like the Joe Walsh song as they're walking down as they're walking down the beach. You just kind of go out on a happy note, walking into the sunrise. And these dudes have to be dead tired. They've been up all night, and they just like,
on the beach.
We're just gonna go walking on the beach. The rest of us, the ones that survived or didn't get arrested.
Yeah.
But yeah, and you just hear like the screams off screen. You don't know what happens to Luther or the rogues at that point, but they all gang up on him, and you hear the screams. So you assume that they got killed. But yeah, it goes off into a happy note. The Warriors made it back home, at least half of them, almost. And the Wright gang that did it, they got caught. So it's a happy ending for the Warriors, pretty much. So you don't know what happens after that. You know, does Swan leave the Warriors with mercy? I feel like they're a toxic couple. They shouldn't be together, but they just needed. I guess I didn't see the need to incorporate a love interest into this movie at all. But I guess.
Well, now that you tell me that Fox should have been the original love interest, that would have been better for me. If she loved a side character and that's why she was with it. When they made it her loving Swan and they were like the main couple, then it felt like the central focus of the story for a while, but like it doesn't go anywhere. Like
exactly.
Like I'm like, oh, okay, like sure, where the fuck's their chemistry?
And for
any of that,
exactly. And for 80% of the movie, he's a dickhead to her the whole time.
Huge dick.
Yeah, and it's only like that one scene, like after he leaves her in the subway and she meets up with him before the brawl. He's like, I kind of went a little hard on you back there.
My bad.
He's like, my bad. And I didn't need to say all that, but and then pretty much from then on out, he was all right with her magically. He was okay with her from that point on. But yeah, I do have the problem. My main problem with the movie is just it goes out on a very anticlimactic note. Like you think that you want to have that final confrontation with the people that set them up and are out to get them the whole movie.
Too.
Yeah, on the beach too. It would have been cool to have a cool brawl out on the beach.
They're right near the pier. They could have went up there, like all that stuff.
Yeah,
could have fought on Coney Island, like in the theme park. You know, like
in front of the wheel or
cool.
something. I don't know.
Yeah.
And then like at the end, you could have just got on the Ferris wheel and rode it as the credits were going, or so. I don't know. But yeah, I actually really enjoy this movie. It's a movie I would put on just to have in the background a lot. I feel it's just one of those movies I feel like I can pop on at any time and just kind of zone out. It's just one of those movies for me. I just really enjoy, and it's such a product of its time too. It's a very like 70s movie, and I feel like that's what draws it to me because I love those very old gritty. It's kind of like a Grindhouse style movie in a way, just not without not without all the gore and blood. But I just love the feel of it and just the atmosphere and how it kind of puts you into that world of the Warriors. And it's just something about that story, and it's so simple. The story of just trapped behind enemy lines and you just got to make it back to your own territory, and just the thought of just all these different gangs spread out just looking for this one. It's just a really cool story, and I that's just what draws me to it.
So you dig it.
Can you dig it?
I dig it. Yeah, I can dig it.
Well, I'm a little harsher on it than you. I kind of dig it. It's
Okay.
The story is the best part. I am with you there. I think the characters are very weak in the movie.
Yeah.
You don't connect with anybody. Like, they're all very surface level characters. You got the dick, you got the leader, you got the young one. Like, they're all just surface level characters. And maybe that's not the movie they're going to. I'm with you. The cinematography is awesome in it. Very great shots. The city feels dirty. It feels good. The soundtrack's good.
Yeah.
It just doesn't do enough for me, though.
I understand.
I know you don't grade them anymore, but it's a high C, low B for me.
I've been doing like, would you buy it, rent it, or miss it type thing?
It's a rent for me. I wouldn't buy it.
Okay.
It's a cult classic, and I think it is perfectly a cult classic. I don't think it was super missed or anything. I think it's something that's good if you're looking for a movie of its time.
Yeah, I would probably say rent it. Like, unless you're really into that old school vibe of like the 70s movies, or like that's kind of like a grindhouse gritty feel, then I would say you buy it. But to just anybody who's just looking to have a good time, just an easy watch, so it's an hour and a half. It's very well paced, I think. It goes by pretty fast. So I would probably say rent it for most folks, the common person.
I think it's hard to get into if you haven't seen it. If you have no history, I like rewatching it. It's a good rewatch.
Yeah.
I don't know how good of a watch for the first time it would be, because it's so old at this point. Like, it has a very 70s pace. I do agree with you. It moves at a brisk pace, but there's not really anything happening. Like, it's just kind of them moving, like you said, from level to level to level to level. Like, I don't know.
Yeah.
I think it would be better in a different medium.
Yeah, and I mean, all the complaints you have, they're very fair, because I totally agree with you that there really isn't much characterization for any of these guys in the Warriors. I mean, half the dudes you really don't even know their names. You have to look them up to figure out the names. The only ones you really know throughout the course of the movie, unless you're paying attention, like Fox, they only mention his name a couple times. The one dude, I don't know if they mention his name at all, but they do mention Rembrandt. But the main ones are like Swan, Ajax,
Cowboy. I mean, Cowboy's part of it. You didn't mention he's so not a character, you know? Like, he's not needed.
Yeah, he's not needed. And then you got Cleon, who's like the leader, who they only call like the leader one time, and he's cool, but he's the first one to go out, man. I would have liked to see him through at least half the movie, and then you go into like Swan as leader or something.
We didn't connect with him at all, so nobody cared when he died.
Exactly.
Like, okay, whatever.
Yeah. Other than just the basic, like you're saying, the basic, like, all right, he's the tough guy, he's the leader, like the basic character, like their roles for the movie. You don't really have much characterization with them, so you care enough what happens to him. Like Ajax, where you kind of know him because he's one of the main characters at that point, but he's such an asshole where you're like, all right, I'm kind of glad he's getting arrested. Like, this dude probably deserves to go to jail.
He might have the best arc because you do hate him as much. You're good to see him get his up and coming.
Yeah, exactly. He's the one that actually has, who the kind of person he is before
so you're like,
you leave him.
Cool. He goes to jail hot. Yeah, I agree with that.
Whereas like Fox, you don't really get to know him too much, and he gets thrown in front of a train, and it's like, okay, all right.
Even Swan, dude, he's kind of like a wet piece of paper most of the movie, you know?
Yeah,
like,
exactly.
It's just like a lot of nothing.
A lot of the time you see him, he's just like mean mugging, just looking tough, and the one requirement I felt like was like you had to look good with your shirt off, and you had to be able to run a lot. You got the job. That's all.
Yeah. I don't want to go out with a negative viewpoint. All those are fair though, but it really is. It's shot real well. The like you said about the Furies and stuff, like the gangs are very distinct and they're very cool looking. Like even the Warriors, like they're very cool looking. Everything is shot very cool.
Yeah, everything has its own distinct style and feel to it. And like, even though the scene with them in the park with all the other gangs, it's kind of short and brief. I really like that scene, because you like to see, you kind of look around, you see different gangs every time you watch the movie or something. Like, oh, I didn't notice them before or whatever. But yeah, a lot of people that, even though they're not in the movie very often, everybody knows these different gangs or knows what they look like.
Exactly.
But yeah, It's just something about it, man. I love about this movie, and that's what keeps drawing me back to it, even though a lot of the complaints you have are fair about it, about the characters. Sure. But overall, I just love the pace, the feel of the movie, and everything. But I would definitely say rent it for the common person, unless you're into this kind of stuff. I had to go out and buy it because I love this movie, though.
I love plenty of movies that I don't think are great movies, so I get it. It happens.
Oh yeah, but I highly recommend the movie for anybody who hasn't seen it. Definitely go out and watch it. It's worth the watch at least once. All right, so that's the review for this week. Where can everybody find you, Alex?
You can always find me on the Tap That channel, Ways 5. I've been really digging these with Wyatt, so I'm going to try to get as many as I can with these with you, man. I really dig doing these with you. So here, too, hopefully.
Yeah, we'll hopefully do a lot more here coming up here soon. And then we got a whole block of horror reviews coming up in October we got to do here soon. So be on the lookout for that as well, because we try to do that every year now. But yeah, make sure to like, share, and subscribe as always to the Cinema Trip Reviews and Waves 5 Media channel. Make sure to go follow us at Waves 5 Media on Twitter as well. And we'll see everybody next time.